All right, so let's go through some stuff on building muscle. One of the big things that I want to make sure that we kind of go through is when we're talking about all the different things that your body requires to build muscle, the easiest thing to do in order to build muscle is make sure you're eating lots of red meat. I realize that you've been told all sorts of different things about red meat and how it's terrible for you, and maybe it's okay, and this and that. It's if you want muscle tissue, you need to eat muscle tissue. I mean, I don't understand where this has gotten so hard for people. You know, we like people are like, well, I eat a lot of chicken. Chicken's fine. When you eat chicken, it's great, all the things, but you need the fat. Like you need red meat because that's what your body is made out of. You know, saturated fat helps your body build all of the tissues in your body, your lung surfactant, every cell that's in your body, your brain, the whole deal. So, you know, and then it's so funny. I was talking about this with somebody the other day. You know, we talk about how important creatine is. Like, oh, creatine is so good for your brain, and like it's neuroprotective for concussions, and it makes you think better. And like, we just need to get more creatine in. You know where we get creatine? Muscle tissue. So yeah, eating that red meat get you that creatine in there too. So like everybody's trying to figure out what it is we've got to eat. Just eat the muscle tissue. Like do that. That's one of the best ways to get in. Now here's the thing. What you also have to recognize is that, and this is one of those big things, is again, this goes back to the whole like my argument about how we should not be using calories as a measurement of function and fuel source and stuff like that. And I get to the argument of, you know, sugar, fiber, and protein are all worth 4. The big thing you have to understand from that, this is one of the biggest pieces that people miss about health in general, is it has nothing to do with what goes in your mouth. It has to do with what is absorbed into your body. Fiber, by definition, never gets absorbed into the body. And so that type of an issue creates the point that, okay, well, fiber is blocking things from getting absorbed, and I need to bring tissue in to the body to get absorbed. What's important now? Well, what's the inflammation in your gut look like? You know, people are like, you gotta eat 2 grams of protein for every pound of body weight in order to gain muscle tissue. That would mean I'd have to eat 520 grams of protein a day to get any muscle mass. That's absurd. That is not how it is. So the cleaner you get your gut, the better you get your gut, the more it can absorb these nutrients, and the better once they're absorbed, now they can go and fix the muscle tissue in your body. So this is a really big thing that you kind of have to recognize of kill my parasites, kill the yeast, restore the probiotic function, clean my liver. This is one of the big reasons that coffee enemas are such an important thing for people who are trying to lift and trying to gain muscle tissue. Keep that inflammation as low as possible and you'll be good. And they're like, well, isn't the inflammation from lifting good? Yes, it's very important. And guess what? You won't mess up that inflammation. That inflammation is from trauma. So remember this, like there's biochemical stuff that's just like acid eating away at you. You got to clean that stuff up. You got to get the waste and trash and garbage out. Now, when you have trauma, that's swelling and inflammation, things like that. Here's the thing. In that inflammation carries IGF-1, which is insulin-like growth factor 1, which is the way that your tissue then responds to damage is it's like immediately start healing and immediately start growing, which is inhibited by inflammation. So clean up all the inflammation, then go traumatize your musculature really, really well, and then it'll start building back up. Now, here's the thing on this. This gets in the argument of should I lift heavy or should I lift, light and do lots of reps? It kind of depends on what you're going for. So the problem with lifting heavy and low reps is that you're going to outstrip your ligament and tendon function. You're going to have damage sooner or later. You're going to tear a ligament. You're going to tear a tissue. You're going to tear something. So I'm not a big fan of lifting heavy. And people are like, well, if you lift heavy, you get stronger faster. It's questionable. I think you do get a little bit stronger faster, but the problem you run into is that let's say you get stronger 30% faster, which is a giant amount. Like it's silly big. And then you get an injury once or twice a year that keeps you out of the gym for 6 weeks until you're not working out at all for 6 weeks. Take a look at that timeline and be like, stronger, super weak because I didn't work out for 6 weeks. And then we kind of come back up versus a steady line that's constantly going up and there's no injury. So there's no injury, there's no damage to tissue, there's possibly no surgery. And so it's a much better path, in my opinion. You guys can do whatever you want to lift in a manner that is damaging and to the tissue to the point where it fatigues and fails, and then moving up as you go. Big full range of motion stretches, perfect for the joint. That's kind of how, like, when we're looking at building muscle tissue, that's how you do it. Now, what's funny is that people don't, like, when we talk about working out, we talk about why it's so good for building muscle tissue and how building this muscle tissue is the fastest way to burn fat. If you're in a fat burning state, let's get there first. So if you're eating tons of things that are sugary, so you're eating a very, very high protein diet with a bunch of medium to high glycemic carbohydrates, you're not going to see as much fat utilization because your body's not using fat for fuel. It is using sugar for fuel. So the sugars you're eating, the carbohydrates you're eating, the protein you're eating, all turns into sugar to fuel your body, which is fine. Like, again, depends on what your goals are. So that we use that a lot. So, but if you're trying to burn fat, you need to start moving into a higher fat diet so that your body has more fat. And it's like, look, I got, 60% of my diet or 70% of my diet is fat. And, the other 20% is, then we got 25% is protein, and then like 5%, which are your fiber style carbs. Your body's going to burn the fat as a primary fuel source. Now, what you want to do is you want to take it to the point where your body is out of fuel. When it runs out of fuel, which is ATP, not calories, when it runs out of ATP, it has to make more. So what does it do? It asks the mitochondria in the muscle tissue to produce extra ATP. If you constantly ask the body to provide more ATP than it has, it will make more, you will become more mitochondrially dense in the muscle tissue, thus requiring more fuel all the time, thus increasing your body's ability to burn fat. So this is one of those big things that you kind of have to factor in, is when you're doing your diet, when you're doing your exercise, when you're doing all these things, if your goal is to burn the fat, we got to put your diet into a position where your body is most optimal for burning fat. And then we have to do something with your muscle tissues where we're trying to, yes, grow, because, anabolism or addition of extra tissue is wildly energy dependent. Your body requires a bunch of nutrients to do it, and stitching new muscle tissue requires tons of energy. So yeah, lots of ATP. Definitely building muscle tissue is definitely going to help burn fat. But the thing is that, and this is the other side of it, if you take your muscle to failure, what ends up happening is, like, and we've all, like, everybody who's lifted has felt this, where you're going and you're like, yeah, and you're like, and you're just like, you're done. And you're like, oh, I'll drop the weight 20%. You're like, no, I'm still done. You're dropping like 30%. You're like, I can kind of move it. Well, what happens is that when your muscles do this, they move, it requires ATP to get the myosin heads to move at all. And so getting them to move is highly dependent upon adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, which is what your body makes out of fat or out of sugar to fuel the body. And so when you run into this giant deficit of ATP, this is when your body goes, oh crap, we've got to make a bunch more ATP. And so we've got to start burning down whatever it is we've got, whether it's sugar or whether it's fat. Now, my argument against the sugar diet is that if you're running on sugar and your body goes, we're out of sugar, guess what it breaks down in order to get the sugar? Muscle tissue. If you're running on fat and your body goes, we need more fat, it breaks down the fat to get the fat to produce the ATP. So it just kind of depends on what kind of system your body is put into. And you can do this by the day, but usually for most people, it takes about 2 to 3 days to get your body kind of to run in that style. And the whole day you've got to maintain it. So, like, you can be fasting, which is fine, because if you move into a fasting diet from a ketotic function, what ends up happening is that you're like, all right, burn fat for fuel. And then you go, no fuel for you. And your body goes, all right, cool. We'll continue to burn fat for everything except the blood. We'll break down muscle tissue for the blood because your blood can only run on sugar. So that's kind of how that process goes. So if you're looking to build more muscle tissue, you're going to have to fuel it. I highly recommend that you move into a lower carbohydrate. Okay. This is where we start to, differentiate on diet. So this gets into somatotyping. So you've got ectomorphs, mesomorphs, and endomorphs. Ectomorphs, you need high sugars in order to do this. And so we've got to really increase your glycemic function. Now, depending on where you are on the ectomorph scale, so let's say we break these three regions up into individual regions, which is kind of how they are. All right, so guys, on the far end of ectomorph, you could go work out, you could, work out until, you just kill yourself. never gain any muscle mass at all. You need a much higher sugar load than the rest of us. I've had to give some of these guys basically candy in order for them to put on mass. You're like, but I thought it was made out of protein. It is, but the problem is that in order to get the nutrients into the tissue for the tissue to do what it's supposed to do, you've got to really kind of ramp up that force in. You got to lift real hard. And some of these guys, it's just easier to increase your testosterone levels. Watch your hairline on that though. So those are your ectomorphs. Yeah, they are going to require more sugar. Guys in the middle, these are mesomorph guys. Depending on which side of the mesomorph you fall on, because think of mesomorph as kind of in the middle of the ecto-endo scale. So the guys who are in the middle, the mesomorphs, if you're ecto-meso, you're going to require more sugar stuff. So this is where starches are great for these people. So I like potatoes. I like things like that. Natural starchy stuff, not bready stuff. So sweet potatoes. Rice is a great option for these guys. Oatmeal is also a pretty decent option for these guys, just from the glycemic standpoint. I'm not a huge fan of oatmeal because it leaches a bunch of nutrients out, but we can put minerals back in. It's not that big of a deal. So that's really great for those guys. You go even mesomorph, you guys can you guys could start to run keto stuff. You could run a high protein diet. A high protein diet would be fantastic for most mesomorphs. I would say the centerpiece of the scale, you've got probably 20-30% on the ecto-meso that wouldn't do as great. You've got probably 20-30% of the meso scale that's on the endo-meso scale that wouldn't be as great. But the middle piece would be phenomenal for just a straight up high protein diet. Now we start moving into the endomorph side. On the other side, you guys, this is where I live. You guys are going to be packing on stuff really easy. Your body is super efficient with the energy function it gets. And so you're going to want to kind of scale back on the amount of sugars you give your body. You guys are think of it this way. This isn't exactly how it works, but think of it this way. You guys are super, super sensitive to insulin. And so your body gets any insulin, it's going to store everything as fat, which is why, and I use this example a lot for endomorphs, this is who I am. Like if I watch somebody eat a donut, I'll get fat. Like that's how endomorphs are. Like a lot of these big fat guys, you look at them, you're like, man, you must do nothing but eat. And they're like, I know. No, they don't. Like they eat a decent amount, but it's not what you'd think. It's just their body stores it really, really, really heavily, and it never stops storing it. So those guys, we got to cut the sugars almost completely out. Fasting is a fantastic thing for this group because your body is, like I said, super efficient. These are the guys who do really well. Like I eat once a day. I do really, really well there. We've got guys who are eating like once every day and a half, once every 2 days, which I've done a lot of the 47-1 splits. Do great on those. But that's kind of how this thing works out. So when you're looking at building muscle tissue, you've got to recognize the biochemistry primarily of what are we bringing in. So you got to knock out all the gut inflammation, liver inflammation, keep that stuff down, keep that stuff moving out. And then you've got to make sure that you're regulating, because your diet needs to be based upon hormonal function. Like when you eat that food, what is it doing inside your body? Is it turning to sugar? Is it increasing insulin production? Is it increasing glucagon production? Is it helping with ghrelin and leptin production? Ghrelin is the hormone that makes you hungry. Leptin is the one that makes you feel full. Like, how are we playing with those two hormones? And then and then outside of all that, this is the stuff that's easy to control. And then it's, where's your testosterone levels? Like, that's your healing hormone. Where's your testosterone? Where's your growth hormone? It's funny because I get guys in here who are in their 40s, and we bring their testosterone levels back up to where they were designed to be. Like, don't think of testosterone as a drug. Think of it as a nutrient. Like if your B vitamins at 200 and it needs to be at 2000, and we give you B vitamins that your body normally makes, but it's not making enough. When we bring your B vitamin levels from 200 back to 2000, you're like, man, I feel awesome. We didn't give you a drug. We raised your nutrient levels back to where they're designed to be. So when you look at your testosterone, you guys, and you're like, oh, my testosterone's 185 or 300 or 400. And you're like, isn't it optimal between 800 and 1200? Yeah. And you raise that natural level back up to where it's around that 1,000 mark. You're like, man, I feel amazing. Don't be like, well, I took this drug. I know that's what you've been taught. It is 100% wrong. It's all propaganda. Like, raising your testosterone levels back up where they're supposed to be should be viewed as the same thing as raising your D3, your B vitamins, or any other nutrient level back where it's supposed to be. Now, you want to have the argument about drugs. We can talk about DECA and Tren and WIN and antibiotic, all those things. And they're great to use, but I don't think that you can make the same argument for them that you can that testosterone is a critical nutrient. So that's how all of this stuff comes in. Now, the other big thing is that we increase growth hormone just a little bit. especially in the older guys. And I love the peptides for that. So that's going to be your biggest thing on building muscle tissue. Decrease all the inflammation in your gut, clean up your liver and kidneys so your detox can get out. Consume the right macro set for your somatotype so that your body has the proper fuel. And I would always recommend eating lots of red meat because, again, Google the nutrient lists of steak. That's what you have to put in your body to grow muscle tissue, because that's what's inside muscle tissue. Like, don't think, well, if I just don't have enough zinc and selenium and so like my body will still have muscle tissue, it'll just be without those things. No, it won't. You're gonna have all the things to build the muscle tissue properly. So give it all the things it requires, and then damage the muscle tissue safely to a point where it is going to have to rebuild, and it's going to have to rebuild in a way you want it to rebuild. Like I said, if you highly deplete the ATP production every single time, your body will compensate for that and start producing more ATP within the muscle tissue, which then again helps you burn more fat or more sugar, depending on how you're running your system. So if you guys have any more questions about that, hit us up, questions@chalmerswellness.com. We can help you guys get that all squared away. It's one of my favorite things to do. But yeah, so we'll talk to you guys later. Have a fantastic day.